Payday 2 DLC has always met a mixed reception, and the recent Silk Road campaign is no different. That said, some aspects of the series have always been met with adulation, and the new music has been excellent. In fact, I love the whole game's soundtrack. Every heist track is written in an adaptive fashion, tailored to shift alongside the gameplay. This you may be aware of, but did you know that the assault portion of some tracks have alternate versions? Give the new track Deadeye another listen. It sounds incredible, right? So how does this work? After nearly 1,000 hours of gameplay over 7 years, I can confidently say that I don't have a clue. So let's investigate. Oh! that was a T-pose. Jesus, that was terrifying. Just enter the darkness and it's not Donatello who greets you, it's a T-posing shield. Payday 2 was initially designed around the principle of pseudo-stealth. Heists would begin with a stealth attempt, and were anything to go wrong, you'd need to react to a curtain of gunfire headed your way. Since composer Simon Viklund was deeply involved in development, he ensured that his music was closely entwined with changes in the gameplay. As such, songs progress through 4 stages. They open on stealth, and if things go loud, they then transition into control. Anticipation builds up just before an assault loop that continues until the wave of enemies passes. At this point, the music loops again through the control, anticipation, and assault portions to match the ebb and flow of enemy waves. This is how the music always feels like it fits the gameplay perfectly. However, this doesn't explain the existence of 2 separate assault tracks for Deadeye. Perhaps it plays after the first assault track plays through once, or maybe it's used during endless assaults, a relatively rare mechanic where enemy spawns never stop, and the music remains cranked at 11. That's so wacky. Payday, why do they shoot the guns?
They're felons. Why don't you just make it so that the increases to minimum wage don't apply to felons?
I'm sorry, sir, this is going to be withdrawn from your pay next month. Imagine if after the heist you had to pay for the trauma for all the police officers that you've just ruined the lives of.
And that just went off your pay.
And then the music kicks in. Eventually, we were graced with the ability to make separate loud and stealth builds, nullifying the need for pseudo-stealth. But before this, more and more loud-only heists were introduced, and stealth was being slowly ejected from builds. The first stealth-only heist, 2014 Shadow Raid, aimed to incentivize continued sneaking, and it also brought a change to the music design, creating a template that future stealth-only heists would follow. Instead of the cyclical approach to assault music, stealth tracks progress linearly as you progress through the heist. In the case of Shadow Raid, the initial atmospheric section plays when outside of the compound. Then, a partial bass guitar pattern is overlaid on some simple percussion, with woodwind used for some flourishes. Finally, obtaining the keycards and opening the vault triggers the final section, a full arrangement with a groovy bass and hip-hop style beats to complement it. Loud heist tracks aim to reflect the varying levels of action, but since stealth swaps action for tension, its music instead emulates the satisfaction of progress. Though, if you thought it was lacking in intensity, they also have that covered. If you mess up and the compound is alerted, the game enters a point of no return phase, where you have a minute to complete the objectives and escape with your life, and the music reflects that sentiment. This portion of Shadow Raid's music was so popular that a full, loud heist version was made after numerous requests. Sadly, the excellent point of no return segment of Pulse has yet to be made into a full piece. One can only hope. So maybe Deadeye's alternate music works in a similar fashion, triggered by some objective in the Bullock's Mansion heist. I remember reading somewhere that Cold Silver 2018 has an alternate assault track that works in this fashion, with a portion unique to the No Mercy heist, only triggered by reaching the halfway point. So let's test it. it doesn't work. Perhaps unsurprising, and while it doesn't eliminate this theory for Deadeye, it doesn't lend it much credence either. It is pretty fascinating how ideas like this can sprout up though. My best guess says that it's confirmation bias. Heists have custom music that is selected by default. As a result, Code Silver will be heard most often during No Mercy, so its alternate assault will also be heard the most often there. Said assault version is heard there, and then it's associated with that heist. In fact, there's a simple way to prove this using some back-of-the-envelope calculations. The FBI files say that I've played this heist 7 times. I'd say I choose the random song option on other heists about 50% of the time. So I originally went through all the boring maths, but I'm gonna keep it short. In No Mercy, I've heard it 7 times. Outside of No Mercy, I've heard it 6 times. Because that's basically the same, there's no confirmation bias, I've disproved myself. Because I'm a genius. Payday 2's multiplayer works on a peer-to-peer connection, which means that clients connect directly without going through a central server. Since the game isn't shackled to the upkeep of servers, the game can theoretically still be played online past its lifespan. However, said connection can lead something to be desired, particularly if the host is running a low-end system or has a poor connection. Payday 2 can have a ludicrous amount of desync. Shadow Raid meta actually involves manipulating this to duplicate items. Right hand side one. Jesus. No. Mine jumped from 8 to 10. It used to be worse. Once upon a time, you could dupe items even if the interactions were more than a second apart. This desync also affects the spawning of assault waves, especially if those spawns cause stuttering on your computer. Since the in-game music is designed to build and then drop at just the right moment, it's kind of important that game performance doesn't sabotage it. Thankfully, this was accounted for with a neat little feature which I'm going to dub bridging. First, a little history.
Sega Mega Drive. Got one? Now you can get Mega CD. Plunk, click, take a trip on 500 megabytes. Whoa!
Back in the 90s, when CD-based games were really starting to pick up, the way music was written began to change. Sega in particular were enthusiastic about their Mega CD add-on for the Mega Drive, and so it makes sense that the platform's big Sonic title would feature CD-quality audio, with all kinds of vocal and instrument samples that weren't easily achieved on a cartridge with limited storage. However, one trade-off came in the form of access times. Data could be accessed from ROM cartridges much faster than from CDs. This is why Nintendo 64 games often loaded faster than their PlayStation counterparts. With Sonic CD, this meant that when a level's music reached its end, it needed a few seconds to return to the start of the track. In the original release, this led to a short period of silence before restarting. The developers originally designed short, simple loops that play for a bar or two before the main track would kick back in. But they found getting the timing right too difficult, and the feature was scrapped. The game's later overhaul and re-release in 2011 partially recreated this feature. Payday 2, believe it or not, operates with a similar feature. Above anything else, the game tries to keep enemy spawns and placements consistent across all users, which is why you sometimes see units suddenly jump across the map. Since the gameplay is key, the music takes a secondary priority to it. If there's a disconnect between the host and one of the clients, then the game needs to take a few seconds to get everything in order, before kicking off the assault wave. However, the anticipation section of the music is written to build linearly for a fixed length, before finally reaching a crescendo and switching to the assault portion. If the assault wave is delayed slightly, the game can switch to a short musical loop designed to slot in between the anticipation and assault phases. Whereas Sonic CD attempted this in the 90s to deal with the delay in reading CD audio, Payday 2 does this to account for desync in online play. I find it fascinating that the same trick is used decades later to deal with a completely different problem. You know that that's not a timer, it's a health bar.
Huh. So if you actually, do keep the cops occupied, you can keep them alive longer.
There's an easy way to test. Throw grenades at him, he dies instantly. Equip grenades. Or an RPG. It does 12,000 damage. Alright. Ready? Go!
I just got your escape driver.
Bane talking to himself like, oh shit, they got the driver. Why'd they do that?
Returning to our Deadeye investigation, I guess I should point out that this alternate assault feature isn't exclusive to this song and Code Silver. In fact, some other tracks use it in quite a curious manner. Ode to Greed from the Big Bank Heist and Break the Rules from Scarface Mansion both include lyrics. As you can guess, these lyrics don't appear often. In fact, they're pretty rare, just as rare as Deadeye's secondary assault. Most of the time spent making this video was just getting it to bloody trigger. There is one more theory that I've heard. Frankly, it's quite a boring one and it's a bit tougher to investigate. The alternate assault could be random, a dice roll. This would explain why they crop up pretty inconsistently, but if this were the case, I could in theory be testing this for the rest of my life and never have it happen again. At this point, I decided to look externally, and who knows about Payday better than the people modding for it? I made my way to the Mod Workshop Discord, thoroughly out of my depth, to sheepishly ask if anyone knew how it worked. And I got some answers. Thank you to Mr. Vavlo and Happy for the assistance here. With your help, I was able to go in-game and verify how this feature functions. Well, as far as I possibly can, of course. Every loud heist song in Payday 2 includes the 4 sections that I mentioned at the start, but some include bonus parts. For example, you can sometimes find short intros for, say, the stealth portion of a song within the game's files. Some tracks have an alternate assault that plays randomly on any heist. Some testing of my own confirmed that this dice roll is made during heists, when the next in-game assault wave begins. Each assault wave is a new chance to get the special version, and that version will loop until the wave ends. The trigger chance is pretty low, so it's somewhat of a special occurrence, but to my knowledge, no external factors impact the chance, so my endless assault theory goes out the window. It makes sense considering how few heists endless assaults actually appear on. This also means it doesn't work progressively like stealth music. The simplest way for me to test the randomization theory was to try and get Deadeye's alternate assault to trigger on a different heist from Bullock's mansion. This took a shockingly long time, as in days. As I said, having it trigger is uncommon and random. It happens so little that I'm second guessing myself. Has this ever existed? Is this the right song? Am I going insane? I just thought about what it would sound like if it played the alternate version there. The fact I'm fantasizing about it now is kind of worrying. Eventually though, I heard this. Finally got it! Oh! I have spent 2 weeks on this! 2 weeks! I thought it wasn't possible. I was starting to doubt my entire existence. Oh, I can make the video now. Oh, thank God. And yeah, that's it really. It's not the most exciting implementation. It would have been cool if it was dependent on gameplay like the rest of the soundtrack, but it's still pretty cool nonetheless. And hey, I learned a lot about the hidden systems Simon Viklund used for the game's soundtrack. Even after his departure from the company, newer composers like Gustavo Coutinho have done a great job carrying this template forward, even giving some tracks these additional flourishes, like with Deadeye's alternate assault. With Payday 3 possibly on the horizon, I really do hope that this approach propagates through. Though considering this musical design originates in the first game, it's likely here to stay. Considering how important the series' excellent soundtracking has been for its identity, I couldn't see it any other way.